Okay, so paper one, core vocabulary. Today we're going to be looking at cold environments. So the first thing you need to do is get a copy of the sheet on a Word document or print it out so that you can write your answers down. What I recommend doing is having a go at trying to define the first words first and then going through and green penning your answers based on this video. So let's start off with a cold environment. So a cold environment, generally located in the north, extreme north of the globe, are areas that are at or below 0 degrees Celsius for long periods of time. The polar biome, so the polar biome is a frozen extreme environment. So as you can see, usually covered in ice because it is extremely cold. Whereas the tundra biome is a less extreme environment. So still a cold environment that's below 0 degrees, but we can see that there is more vegetation, although the soil is still frozen. The physical characteristics of cold environments, we're thinking about the climate, the soils, plants and animals. Those are the physical characteristics. Interdependence is when one or more things are dependent on each other. They have relationships and they can't exist without each other. The climate we can think about as the average weather conditions for a long period of time, usually 30 years. A really good way of thinking about climate is what is the weather usually like. Permafrost, so perma meaning permanently or always, and frost meaning frozen, is ground that is always frozen. As you can see on here, we've got the permafrost, which is always frozen soil, and we've got the active layer, which sometimes melts in the tundra biome. Soils, those are the upper layer of the earth, where our vegetation or plants grow. Plants, those are any vegetation, so trees, but when we're talking about cold environments, it's more like to be shrubs, small bushes, mosses, and lichens, and they are producers, so they convert sunlight into ecosystem, and all organisms in cold environments are interdependent on plants. Animals are any living organism that feeds on organic matter, whether that be other animals, other consumers, or producers. People, so people are members of nations and communities, and as well as protecting the environment in cold environments, we also need to remember that lots of indigenous people live in cold environments, and we need to look after their interests too. Plant adaptation, so when we're talking about an adaptation such as this bearberry, it's when it develops special features so that it can survive or cope with the physical characteristics of its environment. So it's suited to the environment. So for example, this bearberry has waxy leaves to retain moisture because it doesn't rain much. Animal adaptation, so again, adaptations are changes in either behaviour or body so that an animal can survive better in its environment. Great example here, the polar bear. It's got double layer of thick fur to survive those really cold temperatures, extremely cold temperatures in the polar biome. Biodiversity. We break it down, bio means living things, diversity means a variety. So when we have biodiversity, it means we have a variety of animal and plant species somewhere. Cold environments are not very biodiverse. There's not a variety of living things, whereas tropical rainforests are very biodiverse. Development opportunities. So opportunities, we're thinking about positive things, and development, we're talking about progress in terms of quality of life and standard living. So development opportunities, we're thinking about how can a country such as Svalbard improve the development of their country in terms of quality of life, standard living. Mineral extraction. So any mineral is usually a raw material that's found in the ground that usually is very valuable. That could be diamonds, but in the example of Svalbard, the mineral that they extract is coal, with 300 people employed in coal mining. Energy is the power that comes from physical or chemical resources. So from coal, we can get energy in the form of electricity, which will help to heat, but also power and light people's homes in Svalbard. Fishing, nice and simple, the activity of catching fish. And as you can see, the great video game, Barents Sea Fishing, made about just how much fishing goes on in the Barents Sea around Svalbard. Tourism is the industry or the organisation of holidays and all the provision of services for tourists. And adventure tourism, in particular in Svalbard, is really popular. Extreme temperatures are temperatures that are especially hot or cold. Obviously, when we're talking about Svalbard, we're talking about extreme cold temperatures. Inaccessibility. So, in meaning without access, being able to get to something, so it's very difficult to get to places in Svalbard because of the lack of road infrastructure and also the permafrost. Infrastructure, so infra kind of means within or underneath, and the structure, so it's the underpinning structure, all the things we need to live our lives. So roads, bridges, electricity, water pipes, gas pipes. And it's a particular struggle in Svalbard because the permafrost is frozen, so we can't build pipes, for example, into the ground like we would here. A wilderness area is a wild area that hasn't been inhabited by people or cultivated, which means farmed. Think of wilderness areas as untouched. They are the most natural places in the world. Fragile environments are environmental ecosystems that are very sensitive to change. And in a fragile environment such as a tropical rainforest or a coral reef, a small change, a little bit of damage from human activity can take decades to be repaired. Economic development. When we're thinking about economic development, we're thinking specifically about progress in terms of GDP per capita or standard of living, people making more money. Usually when we think about economic development, moving from an LIC to an NEE, we're thinking about industrialisation or an increase in factories, which is going to lead to the multiplier effect. But don't forget, economic, just draw your dollar sign. Conservation. So conservation is the act of protecting or looking after Earth's natural resources, whether that be a giant panda, a polar bear, or the tropical rainforest. We need to conserve them, look after them, protect them. The use of technology. So when we're talking about the use of technology in cold environments, we're talking about using technology to conserve, that word that we just looked at, protect the cold environment, but also carry out economic development at the same time. Simply put, making money without damaging the environment. The role of government. So lots of governments play a role in conserving cold environments and making sure that economic development happens. So the government are responsible for ruling over a country. So an example, in Alaska, the US government have created the Western Arctic Reserve. So their role in protecting the environment is to create a reserve or national park. Finally, international agreements. That's when two or more countries agree to do something. The Antarctica Treaty, for example, which is ratified by all the countries and signed by all the countries that you can see in here, they have agreed to protect Antarctica. Finally, conservation groups such as the WWF, the Worldwide Fund for Nature, those are groups that carry out conservation. They protect and look after organisms, species in fragile environments. They often work with governments, but also with businesses to make sure that those natural things are looked after. Now that we've had a quick recap of all of these key words, have a go at your core vocabulary sheet if you haven't already, where you can use this video to green pen your answers.